Hello, this is Coach Aaron Saft in the MR Runningpains podcast. Come to you today with a solo episode. I'm going to kind of update on my training, but I want to talk about some principles that I'm following. That kind of my coach Patrick Regan and I we work together. We communicate just to make sure I'm in the best place that I can be. That I'm recovering and feeling good about my training. So I'm going to talk about some of that and how we got to that place. How did Coach Patrick and I get to where we are now? Because it wasn't always like that. But I also had a great question come in. So Kathleen asked about preparing for a race, and in that preparation, what happens if you're just not feeling it in training? Like what can you do? What should you expect? How do you cope with that? Or how do you move forward? Which is a great question. So I've got that question to answer, and then kind of a multi-pronged episode here with my own training and how I communicate with my coach. I think the two kind of the two topics kind of really meld well together. When your training is just not going the way you want it to, what can you do? So let's just start with where I'm at. I've had a number of people kind of, how can I follow along your training? How can I, hear updates? And so, one way is obviously to follow me on Strava. On Strava, it's under Aaron Saft, MR Runningpains. So you can find me on Strava. Links in the show notes if you want to follow me there. It's a place that folks ask me questions, and you can see what I'm up to, how things are going. And I'm going to talk about that because there's caveats that come with looking at people's Strava and seeing what they're doing and comparing it to your own, or trying to adapt, what you see to your own training. So I want to make sure that I give you an understanding of where I've come from and where I'm at now and why I'm at where I'm at now, because I don't want people just to kind of jump into training and seek higher mileage, higher volume, and I don't want you to get hurt. So we're going to talk about some of these things that I do, what I do, all that kind of stuff. But just to kind of circle around, for those that may be listening to the podcast for the first time, those that have been listening know I am going after the Grand Slam of ultra running this year. The Grand Slam consists of Western States Endurance Run in June, the Vermont 100 in July, Leadville 100 in August, and the Wasatch 100 in September. You can also include in there the Old Dominion 100 in Virginia. That is also in June. It is before Western States. I'm also signed up for Old Dominion. It is kind of a backup plan as to if any of the others did not work out. Now, as it stands right now, as I record this on March 22nd, I just received word this morning that I had the code to register for Leadville. Those of you that know, I am raising money for Vermont, and I am raising money for Leadville. I have received charity spots. Now, I have reached my fundraising goal, but this is for a very worthy cause. So if you can contribute, the links are in the show notes. If you can contribute to either campaign, the Vermont is run for the Vermont Adaptive. It is for adaptive athletes, not only to ski. I think that's kind of confused because it used to be the Vermont Adaptive Skiing, but it is for all sports. What this Vermont Adaptive organization does is that it provides the funds for equipment and whatever recreational fees they may incur. It's kind of it's sought as a skiing foundation because there's such expenses to skiing, especially for adaptive athletes. Be it the equipment or be it the ski lift, which they cover both. But Vermont Adaptive works with people that want to run or mountain bike or do whatever water sports it may be. They help these athletes get into sport. And that is obviously for the Vermont race. I'm raising raising money for the Vermont Adaptive. Now for Leadville, I wanted to keep a similar theme, so I sought out the Challenged Athlete Foundation. And the Challenged Athlete Foundation is a West Coast-based company, but they have the same mission to provide the opportunities for challenged athletes, be it a physical disability or whatever it may be, that they may be, have the opportunities to participate in sport. It is a tremendous why. As I've seen these campaigns grow, as I've heard athletes speak, watched videos, it just gives me such tremendous inspiration and motivation to complete these races. So my why is only growing. And I can't thank those that have contributed to these campaigns enough. I'm honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for making contributions. You are making the difference in these athletes' lives. I want to recognize that. We are close to raising $8,000 for between the two campaigns together, which is phenomenal. I had to raise $4,000. It was my commitment. $1,500 for the Vermont Adaptive and $2,500 for the Challenged Athlete Foundation. As I said, I've reached those, but we continue to raise money for these athletes, and I think it's wonderful. So again, if you can contribute to either campaign, the links are in the show notes. Not only does it mean the world to me, to show your support for what I'm trying to do, but it means the world to these athletes, which in turn means even more to me. So if you can contribute from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I'd love to see $10,000 raised. As a personal goal, I'd love to see that if we can reach that together. In part of this, I had to contribute myself. So, I made my contribution. So, but whatever you can do, if you can, donate $5, that's tremendous. I couldn't be more grateful for whatever you can contribute to these. It's just wonderful. Cause providing these opportunities to these athletes, as I said, listening to what these foundations have done for these athletes and seeing the joy that it's brought to their lives, some semblance of maybe what was normalcy for them and was taken away by an injury or a disease, just having the capability to do something like this, it just means the world to the athlete, as you can imagine if running was taken away from you for some reason and you were presented a viable way to participate again in the sport. Wouldn't you jump at that opportunity? And that's what we're giving these athletes, is that chance to participate in sport again. So I thank you for that. So again, check out the show notes. If you have questions, want to hear more, you can look up the organizations, learn more about them, find out more about the athletes. But that's how I got my entries into Vermont and Leadville. And again, Leadville sent me my code today. As I said, I fulfilled my fundraising obligation, but I don't want to stop there. I'd love to continue to raise funds for these. So that's why I'm presenting this right now. So thank you. So if you can take a moment and just jump into the show notes, click one of those links and donate. Thank you. Obviously, it's just such a great thing. But now I have registered for all 5 races. I suspect that I will be giving up my spot at Old Dominion as it stands right now. Western States looks like it's 100% go, even with the amount of snow that they have there right now. I listened to a podcast the other day, have Crack a Brew with AJW, and Craig Thornley, the Western States race director, was on there. It looks like all trails are viable and usable options. So as it stands right now, Western States is a go. So I'm super excited about that. That I hope will be my first race. I really want to put my energies into a sub 24-hour finish at Western States. And 3 weeks later is Vermont. I'd love to PR at Vermont if I'm recovered. Very runnable course. My PR as it stands right now, I believe, is 19 hours, I want to say. I'd have to look back. That was at Chattanooga in 2018, I want to say. But love to crack that PR if I can. Then 5 weeks later is Leadville. Leadville is obviously a challenge in multiple regards, being the altitude and being race number 3. So my goal there is, I think it's sub 30 gets you the big buckle. So that's where I'm shooting for, is just get that big buckle. And then lastly, Wasatch. Wasatch, I think, is probably the most challenging of the 3 courses due to the amount of elevation gain and altitude. So finishing it off with a very tough race, but I have a provisional entry into Wasatch. I did not get in through the lottery, but being a Grand Slammer, I am given the provisional entry, just with the provision that I have to finish 3 of the races prior in order to gain my entry into Wasatch. So if I finish Western States, Vermont, and Leadville, I will be granted entry into Wasatch and be able to toe the line to try to finish it off. So really tough challenge. Really excited about this. We have these audacious goals. As I spoke with one of my athletes today, we don't know. Obviously we don't know if we can finish. And I think that's part of, the answer for Kathleen is we never know how a race is going to go at whatever distance. We really don't. Sure, if you're running a 5K, half marathon, even a marathon, you're most likely can finish. Maybe you're not going to get your A goal, but you're most likely going to be able to finish. But this one, so much can go wrong, right? There's just so many opportunities for the race not to go right. So many conditions, so much distance, the amount of, recovery, injury potential. There's just so many things that have to go right for this to take place and for it to happen. So, I'm excited for all of the possibilities. One condition to race Vermont, and this, kind of came on me today. I knew about the condition, which is to finish a 50-mile race in under 12 hours. And, those that have been following along, I was registered for the Rim Runner 50-miler next week in Tennessee. It's in Sewanee, in the Franklin State Forest. And we received word today that the race was canceled. I woke up this morning to work at 4:30. And what did I come to find out? The race was canceled. Now, we had some semblance or some idea that we were going to have some problems because the 100-miler for the race was canceled due to the fact that the forest was restricting hours of usage to daylight hours. So, unfortunately, the 100-miler had to be canceled because, obviously they could not run through the night. What ended up happening, and this is due to park usage by other users. I don't want to blame any one group, but unfortunately, they closed the forest to all park usage, which obviously is really hard, on all users. But they could not make an exception for this permitted group of us to race, so they had to cancel the race, which was really tough. So at 4:30 this morning, reading that, I went to work, went right on to Ultra Sign Up and started perusing what options did I have, to kind of put this in. Now, April 1st, it just kind of fell into my schedule. I could have done one, later in my training, obviously, but I wanted to get this out of the way and have adequate time to recover and train for Western States. It was a good time to build up to this distance, run this race, take a little recovery, and then ramp back up for Western States. So, I try to find something within that timeline. I found the Bootlegger, which is just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. It had a 50-mile distance. Unfortunately, the race was sold out. So I reached right out to the race directors, said, is there a wait list? And if so, can I get on it? I went for my run. I was trying to wrap my mind around why I was so disappointed. Why was I so frustrated? I was frustrated that, the race was canceled, and, I recognized that it was out of my hands, that it was something, beyond the race directors. I wasn't frustrated at the race directors. I recognized that. I wasn't frustrated at the race. I wasn't frustrated at the forest for, making the decision. I think I was frustrated at the user group for being so irresponsible. So, with that, we have to remember we always have to be good stewards of the forest, especially if we're racing. Right? So if you're racing, please be mindful of the other users. Remember that they're out there for their enjoyment. They have just as much right, even though we paid to be there for the event, they have just as much right to be there. So please be responsible, be kind, to the other users, even other user groups, especially. Be respectful of the forest itself. Pick up your trash. Don't drop stuff. Just really try to be a good person. We usually are, and it's just a reminder that we can lose these things, right? And that's what I want to state is just. So I think my frustration was with the user group that forced this shutdown. So moving past that, it took, actually they responded pretty quick. I got done with my run and, checked my email, and there it was, an invitation to register. I read the race director's response. He had somebody drop out yesterday. So a spot did open up, and I was the first person to ask. So it wasn't a favor to me. There was no, privilege or specialty shown to me. I was the first one to ask. So I spoke with my wife, making sure that it was okay that we switched plans to go to Georgia. Obviously, we weren't going to Tennessee. We had a backup plan of potentially going out to Brazos in Texas if this one didn't work out. Which, it was a tough decision because I really would have liked to have run Brazos, but, with the finances and the way things are, especially with how much, money we're shelling out for all the travel and races and such that I'm already doing, it just made more sense for the family that we go to Georgia. Now the Georgia race is a 5-lap course for 50 miles. It says there's 665 feet of gain, so not a lot of gain, very runnable. So I'm hoping it's not too technical. My ankle is still not 100%. I rolled it again, not this past weekend, but the weekend before. It's just not quite strong enough for super technical because, we have some other races that I potentially could have done. I just didn't want to chance my ankle. I'd like to, be as safe as I can, that I don't injure myself and set myself back. So this one seemed to make the most sense, and it was just great that they had a spot open up. Just kind of seemed like maybe it was a little bit of fate that I run this race. So I'll be running the bootlegger instead after going through all of that, and very grateful for that opportunity. I am super grateful. A lap course is not my bread and butter, not my favorite thing, but there are some benefits to it. It's very crew and runner friendly because there's an aid station halfway through the loop, so easy access for them to see me, to switch out whatever I may need. Not that I can't carry what I need for a 10-mile lap, but I'm just very grateful again for this opportunity. So that switched up a little bit, but I hope to achieve my goal of finishing the 50-miler in under 12 hours. That's my priority, so that I have that done for Vermont. Some of the races require volunteer hours, so I offered myself after I race to volunteer for the 100-mile event at Bootlegger. There is a 100-mile event, to help, not only help them, but also perhaps pick up some volunteer hours for one of the races, be it Vermont or be it Wasatch. There are volunteer requirements that I have to fulfill. So trying to take care of all of that. So that said, it's coming along. Now, the training itself, it's coming back. I'm going back into my training log here. And, if I go back into the fall, that's when, my ankle injury occurred. I injured it late October. Had to take a few weeks off to make sure that the ankle was okay. It looks like around November 21st is actually when I started running again. I started building back and growing my mileage. My first week back, I had about 22 and a half miles. And, ankle being okay, I started to grow my mileage. So I went from 22 and a half to 29 and a half. Week 3, I actually jumped up to 40 and 3/4 of a mile, So 41 miles, we'll say. So kind of started growing, that may have been a little bit of a big jump in the training. It was probably just me being itchy, to be honest. So December 5th, that week, was up to 41 miles. Then December 12th, 47 and a half. So kind of growing back my long run. That was the first time I hit double digits in coming back. I had a 10-mile long run. So my long run started out just really minuscule. The week 1, I really didn't get further than 3.5 miles. Week 2, about 4.5 miles. Week 3, got up to 8.5 miles. Week 4, 10 miles. So you can see how I kind of was growing in the distance. I had a medium long runs. I was growing the medium long runs as well. In the week that I did 10 miles, my medium long run was 8 miles. So again, just kind of coming back, growing. So from 10 miles, I went up to 12 miles as my long run. I got in 48 miles that next week. And then you can see this all in Strava if you look. But from 12 miles, I went up to 15 miles, and another kind of big jump in a weekly mileage here, went up to 66 miles that week of December 26th. Had a holiday week there, so I was able to put in a little extra distance. So 66 miles, 15-mile long run, a 12.5 mile medium long run, along with 9 and 11-mile runs. So, volume is definitely building here, getting a lot, stronger. It definitely was better. I can see a note where I'm growing here and feeling better. I think we started throwing in some weighted vest training at the beginning of January. I had a down week from 66 miles. I came down to 61 the first week of January, but still had 2 10-mile runs and a 13-mile run. So again, growing, but adding in some weight vest walks and adding some hills and strides. The week of January 9th, hit almost 70 miles, 69.78, and 17-mile long run. So first time that, I really hit, for me, a longer run. So when I say that, a 17-mile long run, we have to take this in the perspective. I've been running since 1990. Okay. Been at this sport a long time. I ran through college, and in college I was used to doing 100-mile weeks by the end of it. I ran for a Division I program at NC State. We were a very strong program. We won ACCs all 5 years I was there in cross country. We were third in cross country my final year. So when I talk about this, I have a background of endurance. Like, I've grown as a runner since college as well. I've continued to run, continued to grow. I did marathons when I first got out of college, got my PR down to 2:27 in the marathon, and I grew. So, I got out of college in 2000, and I ran the U.S. Trail Marathon Champs in 2007, winning that in 2:30. So, again, it wasn't until 2008 that I actually ran my first ultra, and that was a 50K. I ran 3:25 at the New River 50K. So, again, just growing as an athlete, growing as an endurance athlete. It wasn't until 2014 that I ran my first 50-miler. So, again, took some time to build into the distance and respect the fact that I needed to have the endurance to do so. It wasn't until 2016 that I ran my first 100-miler. And it wasn't until last year, 2022, that I ran a 200-miler. So I've really grown in this sport. Over that time, as I've aged, I've had to back off. In my 30s, I could get away with doing 110 miles as a training week. But as I've grown and as I've gotten older, I've learned that I don't recover as I used to. So now as a 45-year-old, a week like I had last week, I had about 85 miles last week. That becomes a lot on a 45-year-old body, especially with young children, right? My kids, daughter is 12 now, son now is about to be 16. I do a lot with them. I've got a busy life taken after, watch them, take care of the house. I coach not only high school, but I coach, about, 80 to 90 athletes. So, I'm certainly busy. So managing all of this stuff, it takes a toll on me. And so I can't do what I used to do. And that's what I have to recognize. So when I talk to you about these distances, about these weekly mileages, it's the fact that I've grown to be able to handle it. But there is a certain point where now I look at it, whereas I used to be able to do 110, maybe 120 miles as a peak mileage, maybe 90 to 100 as my average mileage. I can't get there now. I can't recover like I used to. No matter how slow I go on my easy days, no matter what I take for my off days, it's just too much. My body just doesn't, have the capacity to do that kind of mileage and recover. So where I'm at is I'm finding comfort in 70, 75 miles as my average week, whereas 85 to 90 might now be more of a peak week for me, and I need to recover that following week, as I'm doing this week. So last week I did 85. This week I've backed down, which is nice because it's leading me into the 50 miler, so I can taper next week and be ready for race day. But that's what you have to understand. If you're not recuperating, if you're not recovering, if it's taking you too much time to recover from how much mileage you're doing on a weekly basis, you need to pull the mileage back. A number of factors come into this. Stress, as I talked about, is one of them, right? So what is your job obligations? Stress, not only is it stress that's created by anxiety from work, but how stressful or manually intensive is your labor? Like, do you do stuff that requires you to be on your feet and using your muscles all day long? If you're sitting at a desk, it doesn't require the same amount of labor. It doesn't require the same amount of stress. But at the same time, if you are under pressure, under deadlines where you feel stressed quite often, that has to be taken into account as well. Stress is stress. So recognize what stress you have in your life. How much does it take out of you? How much can you sleep? Right? So if you're not sleeping enough, you're not going to be recovering as much. You have to take that into account as well. You have to take into account your diet, right? So how well are you eating? How well are you nourishing your body? If your mileage is going up, your calorie consumption needs to match it. We don't eat to run. Excuse me. We don't run to eat. We have to make sure that we're nourishing our body with enough calories to sustain what we're trying to accomplish. Be sure you're hydrating. Right? That's one thing that I recognized that I was not doing well over vacation. I was not hydrating well enough. So I've come back and really made a commitment to stay hydrated and work on hydrating myself better. So take all of that into account. And then on top of it, like, what are you trying to do in your running? Like, are you just doing volume and building volume? If you're not recovering from that, again, reduce the volume. If you're adding workouts, make sure the workouts aren't too hard or too often, that you're recovering from the workouts. Don't keep adding on things that, will create stress and create a fatigue in you that you cannot recover from. Be careful in that regard. And then also, if you're doing workouts, make sure that your easy days are easy enough. Right? So don't always be going hard. Monitor your efforts. Make your easy days super easy. I can't reiterate this enough. I say it in almost every podcast episode. Make your easy days super easy. Jog. Shake it out. Like, it's really just a shuffle on those days. You shouldn't be running hard. It's one of those hard things, but the amount of gains that you will get from those easy days and taking your easy days super easy will benefit you more on your hard days. You'll be able to go harder. You'll get more aerobic capacity by taking your easy days super easy. So really, just kind of embrace those easy days, as hard as it may be. That's a tough pill to swallow sometimes, is recognizing that you're going too hard too often. So recognize that if you're doing it and see if that helps in your recovery process. But again, monitor those things. Looking at Strava again, I'm just going through all this stuff, and you may see that, oh man, he just put in a 16.5 mile run, and then 2 days later he's doing an 18-mile run. Yes, that's true. You can see that I didn't have a great run on that 18-mile run. The day in between, I did 11, and I felt great. I felt absolutely awesome. But perhaps it was too much 3 days in a row. Because like I said, felt great Saturday, but Sunday there's just one of those. Whoa, I just made it through it. There's other factors that went into that. Obviously, we were on vacation, so I was walking a ton. As I said, I wasn't hydrating properly. My diet was way off. I was not eating well at all. It was not a great. I was getting calories, but we'll just say they weren't good calories. So, those things are important, especially in a high volume week. So recognizing that, I needed recovery. So this is where I bring in my coach. We discussed, we had a conversation, yesterday, and I just said, hey man, just not feeling good. Monday I took a day off. Tuesday just was I just felt run down, like I was kind of battling a cold or something like that. And that's usually how I feel if I'm starting to overtrain a little bit, if I'm going too hard, doing too much. So, we talked about it. He had a workout on the docket for today. And, I said, I need another day. I need one more day to recover. So we plugged in a recovery day today instead. So I just went for another normal run. Actually, legs came around today. They felt so much better. Again, I was focusing on all those ancillary things though. I was focusing on my hydration. I was focusing on my nutrition. I was focusing on my sleep, getting in those key components to make sure that my body was recovering and getting what it needed in order to sustain another effort. So, but that's what it takes. It takes that communication. And when Patrick and I worked back in 2000 and let's see, when did that lead up to? 2020. It was right before COVID. I just didn't feel like our communication was there. We weren't on the same page, and I had to take a break because I told Patrick, I said, I just don't feel like we're engaging. We're not communicating. And, so I took a break, but that kind of opened Patrick's eyes. And he was like, oh man, Aaron's right. I need to be more engaged and communicative. And that's what we've changed, is our communication with one another. I tried to do the same thing with my athletes. I try to have them communicate how they're feeling. Do we need to back off? Are we okay to push ahead? What's going on? Do we need to change anything? And it's in that regard, if we need to change the schedule, that's great. And that's what you need to recognize. Even if you don't have a coach, is, you may have something on your schedule, but if you're not feeling it, if you don't feel like you are recovered or ready for that next workout, long run, etc., then you need to pull back. You need to recover. You need to just say, it's okay to take an easy week. The kids that I coach in high school, usually teenagers are boundless energy, but there are times when they just don't feel good. They could have a stressful week. It might be finals week. It may be, they've had a tough time with their boyfriend or girlfriend. And it's okay. I tell them it's all right. The important thing is the end of the season. We need to get you there healthy. And so if I have to pull them out of a workout, or if I have to just have them do a little bit more recovery, that's okay. I tell them that's okay. We're going to make sure that you're ready for the end of the season. I want to make sure that we continue to grow, not continue to stagnate. And that's what you need to recognize in your training, is sometimes it's okay just to have a recovery week, to just pull back on the training and say, in order to move forward, I need to take a step back. And that's what you need to do. And that's okay. So, giving you the okay to take a step back sometimes and just say, this week I need to just take an easy week. That may be mentally too. It's not only physically that we can get fatigued or burnt out. Mentally, sometimes it's just hard to continue training day after day, and you may need that mental break. Sometimes I just ask my athletes when they start to say, I just don't want to go out and run today. If I hear that multiple days in a row, I say, hey, why don't you just take the next week and just do whatever you want to do? If it's a day off, that's fine. If you want to go out for 30 minutes, that's fine. If you want to go out for an hour and a half, that's okay. Listen to your body, listen to what your mind and body are telling you. And that's something you have to acknowledge, is sometimes we don't have the mental capacity to continue training at a given level. So give yourself that mental break sometimes. Turn off the watch. If you're so obsessed with Strava that you need the run to show up, turn on your phone and throw it away. Like, throw it in your back pocket. Don't look at it. Don't worry about what pace you're running or how far you've gone or what time you're at. Just let it run. Go for a loop that you're like, I think I'll really enjoy running this loop. Then stop your phone when you're done. Okay, you can look at the data afterwards, but on the, over the course of the run, don't worry about it. Just shut it off. That's a great way to kind of do things. So, key takeaways here. It's about you. It's not about what everybody else does. And that's the hard thing. We look at, again, we look at Strava a lot of times, social media. We see these people posting, oh, like I did this, that, and the other thing. It's a great celebration, and you should be happy for those folks. They had a great run. They did something great. I try to be honest on Strava, just like I was with that long run. It was not a good day. Like, I have those. They happen. And there's multiple reasons that can happen. And sometimes it's hard to pick out that reason. Sometimes it's not. But, when you look at it, at least you have that kind of training log to go back and say, wow, like I did this, I did that, I did the other thing. And, you can see what your trends are. What was good, what was bad, why was it bad, why was it good? How can you apply that moving forward so that you have more good days than bad days? So use that tool. Use that. Don't just kind of use it to kind of post your run. Like, really kind of put your notes in there. I've done a podcast in the past where I talk about using, your training log. Use Strava for that regard. My athletes use Training Peaks. That's what we communicate through. But we can use those things as tools to make us better runners in the future. Now, to answer Kathleen's question, now training, if it, and she made the caveat that, we are getting older, and as we age, it's tougher to have those key, those peak performances. And that's a great point. We may not be able to run as fast as we used to, but we still want to perform to some level or some expectation of where we're at. And I totally understand that. Now, that said, there are given training cycles where it's just not going to plan. And for whatever reason, you're just not yielding the results that you have in the past. So that said, I would take a step back, look at what you're doing. Are you doing the same thing that you did in the past? Are you doing the same training plan that you used previously? Because if you are, here's what I'd suggest. Change it. The body, it stagnates if you do the same thing over and over again. It needs new stimulation, whatever that may be. It needs a change. So if you're used to doing peak VO2 intervals frequently, right? Your body may just be saying, like, I've cashed that system out. I've given you all I can if you keep feeding me those intervals. I need something different. I need a different stimulus. So try lactate threshold intervals. Okay. It can be just including more recovery days. At one point in my career, I was doing 2 workouts a week, and as I aged and found that I wasn't recovering from those 2 workouts a week, I just changed it to 1 workout a week. I made you strides in 1 workout. So just change the stimulus. If you're not doing a medium long run, throw in a medium long run instead of a second workout. If you're not doing strides, throw in strides. See if that variable helps. If you are looking at your log and you've increased volume, significantly over the course of 4 to 5 weeks, and your body's feeling stagnant, tired, fatigued, whatever it may be, take a down week. Now, there's nothing to say, and I've talked about this in the past, that you need to go up 3 weeks and down 1. The body doesn't work in that cycle, unfortunately. It's an easy way to make sure that you're getting in an easy week, but you can grow beyond that. So, recognizing that, okay, I've been up for 4 or 5 weeks and I am tired, then take a down week. Okay. Like I said, it's an easy way to do it. You can do it, but there's no science behind building up for 3 weeks and then down for 1. Other than the fact that you are getting in a recovery week, but you could be losing training in that regard as well. So, but recognize when you do need those down weeks. That's a really huge thing. So again, training's not going accordingly. Try to change the stimulus. Okay. Especially if you're doing the same thing that you've done in the past over and over again, change the stimulus. Let's say you change the stimulus and you're still not yielding the results you want. So in that case, I would say, okay, let's look at the goal race. Okay. Based on some of the benchmarks, maybe previous races or races that you're doing during that training block, what are those yielding? What results are those saying that, you'll produce on your goal race day? Well, you can use a calculator, right? There are race calculators that you can plug in current performances. Based on that, what should I yield on race day? And that will give you more of a realistic expectation. So you adjust your goals, okay? So adjusting your goals is a good way to be real with yourself. Here's where I'm at, so here's what I should expect. That's tough to recognize that, especially after training super hard. But we also need to recognize when we begin that we may not yield the goal or the time or place that we initially thought. We have to be okay with that up front. That's really hard, is recognizing that things might not turn out the way we want. And what I would say to that is it's good to have B and C goals as well, right? So, all right, if I don't make that time, what's a B goal? What would I be satisfied with if that doesn't come to fruition? Okay, and then, all right, B goal went out the window. What about C? What goal can I make that I have another fallback to say, okay, A and B didn't happen. Now, what's the possibility of C, right? And that just may be finishing. And that's sometimes that's what it is. That's what the day hands us. No matter what we did, everything went well. There was nothing pointing to a day like you were going to have. It just happened, right? For whatever reason, bad sleep, bad stomach, whatever the reason may be to have a bad day, it could have been. But if you're having a bad training cycle, at least you have these other goals to fall back on. So again, creating a realistic A goal or reestablishing a realistic A goal, and then having your B and C goals follow those goals. That's a great way to look at it. I think another good thing is to reach out to someone that, understands training, coach or a friend, and just say, hey, can you look over my training with me? And do you see any holes in my training, or see where I'm going wrong? Why am I having this stagnation? Why am I not yielding the results that I want? That's a really good thing to do, is to have somebody else look over your shoulder and say, well, here's a few things that I would suggest. Maybe you try this, or maybe you try these things and incorporate these and see if you find a difference. Or just maybe you're doing too much and they say, hey, I would just back off here. Potentially you're doing your easy days too hard. All of these things. It's good to kind of look at those, and have that secondary, glance. Like I said, I've got, Patrick in my corner, which is, it's great for me, because if I didn't, I know I'd be doing too much. I'm one of those guys that just loves to go out and just do mileage and build volume and do, long runs that are way too long. I recognize that. So having that accountability, that that person that's looking over my shoulder and saying, hey, Aaron, you're doing too much. Recognize that you should probably back off a little bit, because you're not recovering, you're not getting better. So have those conversations, and find somebody that you can trust, that you can have those conversations with. I will be speaking with a sports psychologist, and actually tomorrow we're recording an episode which should come out next week. And in this conversation, I'm going to bring up this topic as well. How can we deal with these things mentally? How can we deal with failure of not reaching a goal? Or a DNF if that unfortunate circumstance arises. So we'll be talking about those things in the next episode, and hopefully we'll give you some more insight, perhaps some different ideas than what I've brought up in this episode. But I just want to say I do appreciate everybody's support. It is so encouraging. I feel really supported by the community. Not only in my fundraising goals, but in my training. I really want to thank everybody for their comments and, for reaching out to me. I can't tell you, Joe, who listens to the podcast, he reached out to me the other day about coaching. It means the world to me when folks ask about coaching. I do have a few spots that are open for coaching. So if you want to reach out and talk about coaching, I'd love to talk about that possibility with you. Talk about what that entails, what your expectations are, what my expectations are. It's a great conversation to have. So feel free to reach out to me in that regard if you want to hear more about coaching. Again, please consider donating to either of my campaigns, the Vermont Adaptive or the Challenge Athlete Foundation. Once again, those links are in the show notes. I really encourage you to help these athletes if you can. You've already made a world of difference to my efforts and my motivation and inspiration. Not only am I inspired by these athletes that get to participate in sport, but also by your generosity. Like I said, my why grows stronger each day. So I thank you for that. I thank you for listening to the podcast, for being a part of this. If you have questions about any of this, anything that I've gone over, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to answer questions. You can do through whatever platform is easiest for you. Again, people ask me questions through Strava, email me. You can contact me through my website, mrrunningpains.com. However it's easiest for you. I'm happy that I get to share this. I'm an open book. If you want to ask questions, I'm on the same page as Patrick. I understand where I'm going, what we're doing, and like I said, I try to do the same with my athletes. So if I can help to any capacity, I'd love to be that resource for you. So thank you for that opportunity. And thank you again for listening. Until next time, my friends, keep running.